over that, really important. Basic care, the first portion of care when people first come in to receive network care, generally, they've gone through their whole life without ever having their spine checked, which is mistake number one. So maybe they're 10 years old, they're 20 years old, they're 20 years late, they might be 40 years old and never had their spine looked at. Now think about that. If you're 40 years old and you've never had your teeth looked at in your whole life, you would never ever do that. You know, your teeth would look like Austin Powers or something, you know, and you wouldn't fathom doing that. There's going to be a time not too far from now where everybody's going to realize that, and that's going to just be part of what happens when people are first born. They'll get their spine checked, you know, it's something they do regularly during the course of their life, and that's something that should be the case. But generally, that's not right now. People, for the most part, come in, they've never had their spine looked at. So when they first come in, we're trying to correct what's gone on in their whole life, not the last week or the last month, but the physical, chemical, emotional things that have happened to their body and accumulated. So the way they show up is generally they have very high levels of distress in the passive part of their spine, the bones, discs. We call that the passive part of their spine, where things feel like a wall. In other words, the vertebra, when you press someone's back, it shouldn't feel like a wall. You know, it should feel flexible and pliable, and there should be give and range of motion. But most of the time, they've developed that their body is just storing tension and it's rigid because their body has lost that flexibility as there's been more and more nerve interference and more nerve pressure. Second thing, when they come in, their muscles have usually been in spasm in many different areas. We call this the active subsystem of the spine. And that active part of their spine, which acts brilliantly on the passive, that's why it's called active, acts on the passive part of the spine to move it, the muscles, etc. That area is storing tension. In other words, when nerves have overfired for a long period of time, then the muscles contract. And some people, the muscles have contracted for decades in one region, and they may have no idea or not felt it because their body's used to it. Kind of like if you had a pebble in your shoe and you just kept walking on that pebble for day after day. Eventually, you would forget. If it was there long enough, you wouldn't know it was there anymore. Your body would shut off that signal. Very often when people come in, that's the way the muscles of their spine are. Their muscles have been contracting for 10 years, 20 years, and they have no idea that that's the case. But when you feel the spine, so there's a trigger point. If you press on it, they might feel tender, or it's very easy to see on different tests, like the tests we do when people first come in, very, very large amounts of muscle activity. And so those are areas that we know the body has stored tension, very important, stored tension or stored energy. It hasn't been able to release that. The third part of the nervous system, and so we'll see that when people first come in. The third thing we'll see, the neural control subsystem, which is the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves. And also for intensive purposes, all intents and purposes and really definition, the connective tissue around the spine. Understand they're actually finding that the connective tissue may be more primary in communication than actually the nerve system. That's one of a newer thing. Actually finding that the nerve system primary communication may not be electricity, it might actually be sound waves. Is a newer development in terms of science. So there's a lot more to the body and nerve system than people understand. So connective tissue that wraps around the spinal cord or around the nerves is part of the communication network also. Think of that as the Pentium processor or whatever processor we're up to now, okay, of your body. And that has to coordinate the bones and the muscles. It has to coordinate the passive and the active system. Understand there's a radar system that goes back and forth between your brain and the vertebra. People ask this all the time of me. I mean, day in and day out, when people come in our office, they say, well, how does that gentle touch do something to move the vertebra? It doesn't. The intention isn't that the touch is going to move your spine or move your vertebra, but it's going to help your nerve system be able to move your vertebra. It's going to help your nerve system be able to move the vertebra. The bones and the discs they're loaded with receptors. Okay? Actually, anatomists are thinking of reclassifying discs as organs because they meet all the definitions of an organ in and of themselves. So the discs and the bones are loaded with receptors, as are the muscles. And there's a radar system that goes back and forth between your brain and the bones and discs, telling them how much tension they should have, where they should be in space, okay? Should they be to the left or to the right? Should they be working harder here or less here? And when that system is interrupted, It's like the lights being out in a room of your house and you not knowing what's in that room. Your nervous system can't perceive that the lumbar spine on the left side is all curved over to one side. And then the person says, well, how did that happen? I had no idea that was going on. Well, your body, your nervous system has no idea either. It's lost the ability to recognize that in itself and be able to make changes. So what happens is getting that picture of what's really going on in a person's spine, and then that nervous system can store tension and store energy and continue to have pathways firing to do activity as if there's stresses and traumas and events going on that are no longer going on. Your body may think certain things are still happening today that happened 20 years ago, and it's behaving in ways as if those things are going on in terms of the forces it's assembling to your day-to-day activities and the posture of how you hold your body. Understand your biography, what's happened to your life, the story you write about your life, that's what becomes your biology. The armoring of how you hold your body is really the story of your life in terms of how your body contorts and the position of your head and your shoulders and your hips. All of those things are the story of the things that have happened to you. And each different micro movement of the position of your body has a different story and has different information content. So now person comes in and all of that's going on. Starting out in basic care, our goal when people first come in is to adjust their subluxations in such a way, put forces into their spine from the whole range of things that can be done in chiropractic, that the brain and the body starts a redeveloped connection. We want your body to rediscover its connection so that the brain can start to release the tension in the bones and muscles and nerves. So the bones, muscles, and nerves can become more peaceful. Really, that's our goal in basic care. Address the spinal subluxations that involve overfiring of the nervous system in such a way that the forces applied help your brain better find the areas where the lights have been out and have the bones, muscles, and nerves become more peaceful and start to change your posture. That starts showing up as people saying, wow, I moved the mirror in my car to a different position. Or I'm sitting back at the computer. A person told me the other day, he said, you know, I'm not doing it, but I'm sitting at the computer, all of a sudden I have to sit like this. I'm sitting there and I notice I'm doing this and I have to sit like this. I didn't used to do that. I'd sit like this all the time. And I'm not doing it, but for some reason this is happening. It's like I can't control it. I have to sit this way. That is your nerve system self-correcting. When I tell people we want you to develop the ability to be more self-correcting, that's it. That's what we want to see happen. That's how that shows up in a concrete way. Okay? Or I used to sleep this way, and now after you're getting care and basic care, I'm hurting when I sleep this way. The hurting isn't because you're doing something wrong. There's something right going on, and your body's telling you to do something differently, to sleep in a different way than you have. Your body's smart. It has a story to tell you. Your body, all these different things are cues for your body to tell you something different. So it shows up in your posture. Second way it shows up in basic care, big important thing is your breathing. Posture and breathing are your big points of how you want to indicate or pay attention to your improving in basic care. Your breathing, you want to see your breath go from your bottom of your spine up to the top in a rhythmic like wave. C to shining C, we call it. Your tailbone up to your neck. Okay, you want to see breath go in the whole range of that. Most of the time people come in and they first lay down on the table, they look like they're dead. They look like they're not breathing. Living people breathe, dead people don't. And sometimes I look at them like, I can't tell. They stop breathing. I'm not seeing any movement. What's going on? If you watch a baby breathe, their whole body moves with their breath. But as people have stress and tension and events accumulate in their life, they shut down more and more, and there's no movement in their breath. As people regain that breath wave or respiratory wave, it moves up through their body, okay? And they'll notice at first their body increase their breath in their lower spine, and then their breath will move upwards towards their neck, and they'll feel their breath undulate through in between their shoulders, up through their neck, and they'll feel like an expansion happen in a rhythmic upwards movement. And that expansion is part of the spinal fluid mechanism pumping back and forth between the tailbone and their neck,